Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today we have the pleasure of watching CptAxis, who sounds like they're on the wrong side of a Marvel film, playing in their Tier 6 British tank destroyer, the Excalibur, and we know they seem to love this vehicle with Gnome on the side, God save the King, beautiful, wonderful stuff. But I must stop the replay here to also highlight this is an incredible replay within its own right, but this video is specifically to help people who are stuck on what I'd say is the hardest mission to be able to get the Windhund, and that is to earn a high caliber. And this video isn't only just for being able to unlock the Windhund, it will also be applicable to the Dravets and also to the Blackrock if that has any high caliber missions. I can't remember now, I'm stuck on one personally. Not the high caliber one, it's the mother of all high calibers. But I digress, let me focus at hand. So, to get a high caliber in World of Tanks, I've got a load of tips that will be able to assist you with that. Firstly, exactly how much damage you have to do. To get a high caliber, you have to do 20% of your team's total damage. So, accordingly, to be able to work that out quickly, take 10 off the enemy's hit points at the top, and you can activate these hit points inside your settings and times that number by 2. So, we're at roughly 2,400 damage needed to be able to get a high caliber. So just a quick way to do it. A lot of people thinking, well, you could divide by 2 and times by 10. Whatever works for you in your head. And then if you want to, write that number down or just remember it as to what your goal has to be for the game. The next tip that I have for high calibers is they're far easier to get at low tier with good matchmaking. Good matchmaking means that there are less hit points on the enemy team. You want ideally there to be artillery on the enemy team, you want there to be tank destroyers on the enemy team, as few heavies as you... It's not like you can pick and choose, it's not like you're there ticking tech boxes. Oh dear Wargaming, I would like as many artillery, as many light tanks and tank destroyers, and as few mediums and heavy tanks as possible. Oh, and a +2 matchup please. If only we could do that. Also, long story short, yesterday I tried to do that myself at tier 8. I played 75 games and didn't see tier 6 tanks once. So I am declaring tier 8 almost dead for trying to meet little tanks to be able to get the high calibers. However, for the Windhund, you can use tier 6. And for unlocking the Dravets, you can use tier 7. So you want to play as low tier as possible and try to play vehicles that you think are going to do the most damage possible. Whatever works for you. For example, for the high caliber mission, I think one of the best tanks you can play is the Tog. Why? Because not only is the Tog tier 6 for the Windhund, you also get yourself preferential matchmaking. So there are never, ever any tier 8 tanks on the enemy team, so you're kind of guaranteed. And as soon as you get into one of those tier 6 tanks with tier 5 opponents, oh yeah, you really don't actually have to do very much. So a lot of people are probably trying to go about the high caliber in the wrong way. It's purely about trying to pump as much damage as you can. You don't even have to win, just pump damage and focus on low tier tanks, and then just pray to the matchmaking gods that you're going to play against lower tier vehicles, really. If you seriously struggle with the high caliber medal, but you have a couple of good friends, one thing that you can do as well with the high caliber medal is definitely not get them to sign up to be on the enemy team at the same time. That is bannable. I'm not even joking or memeing here. It's rigging, and if Wargaming detects it, they will ban your account. What I'm suggesting that you do instead is invite them to a platoon. Become, get your friends into a platoon and sign up at the same time as them through the platoon feature. They will be on your team, and then what you can get your friends to do is maybe hold their fire on vehicles that you can manage to get farm on. Or alternatively, just be excellent bodyguards. If you want them to do something and not literally just sit there, because your opponents might think, oh, something's going on here. What you can do is get them to load HE shells and fire at tracks and so on and so forth. Now look, it's going to lower their stats. It's going to probably lower your win ratio a little bit. But if you're seriously stuck on getting a high caliber medal, that might be the way to cheese it. I did it for one of my friends in Envest. He's perfectly good enough to get a high caliber, let me clarify. But it was more of a case of they helped me to be able to do a couple of my missions. And so I thought, how can we speed run getting a high caliber for them as quickly as possible to try and help them up. And signing up in 3 togs, where 2 togs were bodyguard for one of the togs. Yeah, I think we did it like 2nd try or 3rd try. Again, we lost the game that they got the high caliber in. It's definitely not something that you probably should do. Everybody should be trying to win the battle. But look, if you're trying to get through Wargaming's tricky missions, it's not that much different to having, for example, a light tank sign up with a self-propelled gun and a tank destroyer, and then trying to get your 2 friends to only focus on your targets. So, those are all of the things that you need to do to be able to get a high caliber. Quickly calculate how much you need to do by looking at the health points of the enemy team. Play as low tier as possible, pray for the best kind of matchmaking possible, and then if after a day of playing or so you still haven't managed to get it and it's frustrating the living daylights out of you, maybe recruit a couple of friends to try and cheese and help you out. And if anyone else has tips for high caliber medals, usually tank destroyers with really big guns get high calibers quite quickly, or autoloaders, you know, the kinds of tanks that traditionally manage to pump out damage. But on the other hand as well, heavy tanks in those kind of top tier matchups, while they can be useful for being strong and having armor that will work against your opponents, you can fall into issues when you sign up with heavies, because when you sign up with heavies, you're making there be a heavy on the enemy team. And if there's a heavy on the enemy team, then to all intents and purposes, that's going to be a very healthy tank. And if it's a healthy tank, that means you have to do more to be able to get a high caliber, making it a little bit more tricky. So, you know, cheesing the matchmaker by signing up with tank destroyers to try and do high calibers can be very useful. The other thing that you can do if your friends don't want to play bodyguards is you could try and have a friend play a light tank and a friend play a self-propelled gun, because that is going to mean there's going to be less hit points on the enemy team, which will be advantageous for you with the amount that you have to deal inside the game. And that won't be the same as them, for example, playing heavy tanks along with you and then loading HE rounds. And they can still play properly while playing a light tank and a self-propelled gun, and maybe even try and get you out of some tricky situations. So 2 options for you, and I really hope that this helps you to be able to get your high caliber. So now that I've given you the breakdown of everybody should be able to get a high caliber in World of Tanks, let's join CptAxis as they now start their 1 versus 6, which they've very quickly reduced to a 1 versus 5 with the destruction of the AEC on the enemy team. They're in an Excalibur, they've had a huge game, they've already got their high caliber medal. Apart from, be very careful, you do not get a high caliber medal if you hit one of your allies. And that is from back in the day when there was team damage in World of Tanks. This is a relic of World of Tanks past. And so Wargaming specifically made it so that if you damaged an ally, you couldn't get a high caliber anymore. And that was to discourage people from thinking, oh, I just need to do a lot of damage. I can shoot my allies as well. That would be a terrible thought for a justification. So the medal specifically said, and still says as a relic, shots must not hit allies. And even though you don't do any damage to them, even if you ricochet off their vehicle, no high caliber for you. But I digress. Back to the action. CptAxis on 2,900 damage now already secured the high caliber as long as they didn't hit an ally, which I don't think they did. And now continues their 1 versus 6 game. And oh, that's what you want to see. A Churchill right in front of you. Puts 1 in, puts 2 in. However, that was the last of the gold rounds that CptAxis have. However, they know that the Churchill 3's turret is weak, so they're managing to go right through the front of that turret. And that overpowered tank for getting a huge amount of experience with its plus 50% experience multiplier compared to all other vehicles just gets shut down. So again, another little tip here, as this is like a tip heavy video, Churchills are fantastic for completing daily missions that require you to get base experience. You'll get more in a Churchill than you will in any other vehicle at a tier that is very comfortable and still earns battle pass points now. Talk about earning battle pass points, that Jackson was just denied a few there, possibly if CptAxis manages to get their way through this situation with another tier 6 TD down. And this is where, you know, it's just crazy damage for a tier 6. We're talking about a high caliber, pretty much nearly double a high caliber now, and they're going to have to do a double high caliber if they want to get through this one, as there's 2 artilleries and a KB1 still remaining on the enemy team. That is a bold bishop. The bold bishop gets forwards, CptAxis still has HE rounds left. Are they going to make use of them? The HE on this tank actually have fantastic penetration. But that cheeky Bishop actually gets a wonderful shot through, and CptAxis isn't going for the HE shells here on the Bishop. Just decides to finish them off with 4 regular rounds, which means they have to be a little bit more stationary now for the M41. However, with the Bishop dealt with, now up to 4,500 damage and a top gun, all that's left is to deal with a KV-1 who hasn't been spotted yet, and an M41 on the enemy team. So the 1 versus 6 now becomes a 1 versus 2. And CptAxis with God Save the Queen, which should... it should be updated really there to God Save the King, right, and all of that jazz. Ventures forth for one more final hurrah to see if they can be able to vanquish the final 2 remaining opponents. So they're using binoculars here, and they're very suspicious that the KV-1 might still be in spawn. However, the binoculars don't quite manage to catch a glimpse of the Tier 5 Soviet heavy tank, who must be on full hit points unless they have managed to be blind-fired. But wow, don't need binoculars to see that, and that really truly shows you how bad that KV-1's view range is, that they're unable to be caught. So we can see here that CptAxis is a fabulous player as they're going into the bush to a point where they're no longer spotted, and they're firing through an opaque bush, which means they're not going to be spotted. But oh wait, that's something that's a little bit more important to deal with. An M41 on the enemy team that doesn't seem to be AFK. Also, CptAxis, you better be careful, you know? You've got to be careful that when you shoot AFK tanks that you don't activate the bot right now. And activating a bot in this situation could be very painful indeed. We might see our antagonist of this battle, at least for the enemy team, manage to get shut down very quickly. Again, not using those HE rounds to guarantee a 2-shot. These are all the little things that you could manage to do to help your chances. But to be fair, what chance does that M41 have? The KV-1 is AFK, CptAxis has them at an angle, and that is it. So now, CptAxis is just got an AFK tank to be able to farm out, and that's the dream for the high caliber. But look, irrelevant of that, I believe CptAxis did 40% of their team's damage this game. And wow, what are they doing? Some kind of gun salute here as they fire 1 shell going in? Fabulous stuff. High explosive shells, probably landing somewhere in the next village. Goodness gracious, probably shouldn't be doing that, right? Maybe in some kind of World of Warships scenery over in the background, right? And I think I can see what CptAxis is planning here. Can you all see what CptAxis is planning? Yeah. Guys, just to say, this is very risky when players do this. Oh, nice HE pens there on that plate, showing you just how good the penetration is on this tank. Be very careful when you do this, boys and girls, okay? Be very careful when you do this, because that KV-1 could come back. And CptAxis realizes, okay, I'm going to just fire 1 shell in to see how many I can have left to know that I guarantee. But be very careful, because sometimes the bot can come back. And also, sometimes when people are AFK, if they're using a bot program, which again is illegal in World of Tanks, I feel the need to clarify these things these days, because there are a lot of new players that might not be taking this kind of stuff for granted. That when people are using bots, illegal programs to be able to grind experience, sometimes they activate upon taking a hit, which kind of makes them look as if they're a player within Wargaming's algorithm. And so, when you shoot an AFK tank, you've got to be careful that now you aren't going to get focused. And you know what? CptAxis is a greedy mother buzzer, boys and girls. Goodness gracious. So they have not only cheesed out the Faden medal, the medal for destroying the final tank with your final remaining shell, they are also cheesing out an Invader medal as well here. Oh my goodness gracious. Absolutely outrageous stuff. They're going to wait for 100%, shoot the back of the KV-1 to get the Faden's medal. And I mean, that might be one of the most cheeky things I've ever seen in World of Tanks history. A Radley Walters, 5,500 damage, albeit against an AFK tank at the end of the game. That Radley Walters medal with a Fadens, with an Invader, with a high caliber. Oh my lord. Look, CptAxis, you definitely know how to use a free meal. Pascucci's medal as well, and the one that everybody wants, the Kolobanov's medal for standing alone against at least 5 opponents, in this case 6, minus the AFK tank, still counts as a Kolobanov's medal. An absolute fabulous replay where literally CptAxis did more damage than the rest of their team combined, and they make a decent profit even after having to fire those excess rounds at the end to try and cheese the fade-ins. So I'd like to clarify that one of my tips for getting a high caliber medal is not to try and find AFK tanks on the enemy team. Look, CptAxis managed to get a high caliber medal 2 times over before they found the AFK KV-1 tank. So just do half of what CptAxis was able to achieve before the AFK vehicle, and you'll be able to get your Windhund. And what happens when you pretty much do more damage than the whole of your team combined, and you're playing in a tier 6 vehicle and you win 1 versus 6? You get 2,421 base experience. That's one of the highest base experience I've ever seen, especially in a tier 6 vehicle. So CptAxis, congratulations to you. This was a phenomenal game of World of Tanks, with or without the AFK tank, and you definitely knew how to apply it as the cherry on top. So CptAxis, congrats, and thank you so much for uploading your replay on the What Record website for the community to enjoy. I thoroughly did, and I hope all of you out there you found these tips and tricks for achieving the high caliber medals for the Windhund and the Dravets missions. If you did and you liked the video and you appreciate it, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments down below, do you have any other tips and tricks for players who are stuck getting the high caliber medals? And what other missions are you stuck on for what tank for the new 3rd season of personal missions? For me personally, I'm stuck right now trying to get 30% of my team's damage, because sometimes it's like do 7,000 to 8,000 damage in a tier 8 vehicle, and when I'm playing my tier 11s, it's sometimes 10,000 damage. So yeah, it's a tough one to be able to unlock that final mission for the Black Rock, but I'm going to try and have another stab at it today. Anyway, that's it. Hope you enjoyed, and as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.